Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are learning Mishna Gittin, Perek Ches, Chapter 8, Mishna Tes, Mishna 9. Today's Mishnah is sponsored by the Garland children, Zeich Nishmas, in memory of their uncle, Gavriel ben Meshenachem. Nishama Shaban Aliyah.
Amen.
Okay. A person divorces his wife. He divorced her. Velani imo b'fundiki. And then there were witnesses that they spent the night alone in an inn. They were divorced, but there's witnesses that velani imo, that means she spent the night with him in an inn. So witnesses saw them, meaning the witnesses see they were alone, but more than that they didn't see. More than that they don't know. Okay, so now they were divorced, and they're now in seclusion. So now the question is, what do we assume happened then, next, and how do we look at it? So Beis Shammai say, Eina tzricha menu get sheni. She does not need another get from him. That means that there's some kind of idea or possibility to think that by being alone with each other, they had relations, and they did it for the purpose of remarriage, kedushin, because we know what are the ways of making kedushin, of marrying a woman, of having her become married to you, at least at the first stage of marriage, which is kedushin. It could be done with marital relations. And therefore the question is, we have witnesses, they saw them go be alone, right? Now the question is, if you witness being alone, can you assume that something happened also? And do we also assume that when they did this for the purposes of kedushin? So Beis Shammai similarly say no. They say no. She doesn't need another get. Beis Hillel oimrim tzricha hemenu get sheni. Beis Hillel says no. She needs another get from him, because according to now. So let me read to you here from how they explain it. So going into Beis Shammai's opinion, she does not need a second get from him. We do not assume that he remarried her by having marital relations with her for the sake of kedushin. Since the witnesses did not see them engaging in marital relations, then I assume that they did. Okay, so the witnesses only saw yichud. They only saw them being together. If they would have seen that they actually had relations, it's a different ballgame then. But if they didn't see them had relations, the assumption is they didn't have. And the explanation to that is that, according to Beis Shammai, so the first thing is like this. So again, the way that the starting point is that the witnesses did not see them engaging in marital relations, only in being in solitude, being in yichud together. And that alone does not give us right to assume that he remarried her with marital relations for the sake of kedushin. Now, the question is why? We'll get there in a second. But the first point is, as they point out here in the notes, is therefore, even if they did engage in such relations for the purpose of kedushin, meaning we don't know that, but let's say they did. They did. And they did it for the purposes of kedushin. And the reason they would do it for the purposes of kedushin is because people typically would not want to make that kind of intimate act sinful. So they turn it into the act of remarriage. Okay? But the point is that since we don't know that they had those relations, so we can't say that we have no witnesses to that fact, that they had relations, to therefore say that they meant to make kedushin with that act. And therefore, even if they did do it, but we have no witnesses to it. There's no witnesses to that fact. Therefore, even if they did engage in such relations for the purpose of kedushin, it does not take effect, because an act of kedushin does not take effect unless there are witnesses to it. Since these witnesses do not know whether they had relations together, there are no witnesses to the kedushin. So that's the mechanics. If there would have been, even according to Beis Shammai, if there would have been witnesses to the fact that they did have marital relations, then even Beis Shammai would agree that they should have kedushin again. But the point is that's not the case. There's only witnesses that they were in seclusion. Beis Shammai says being in seclusion, as we will see soon, for the reason, is not an assumption that anything happened. And therefore, if the witnesses didn't see anything happen, we have no witnesses to even if they actually did it. They did have marital relations, and they did it for the purpose of kedushin. Because no witnesses to the fact. And without witnesses, can't take effect. Now, Why does Beis Shammai assume nothing happened? So they bring down here again in the notes, as we learned in Mishna 4, Beis Shammai do not allow a man to divorce his wife unless she committed adultery, in which case he probably will not want to have relations with her again. Therefore, even if we see them being alone together, we cannot assume that they had relations. Okay? The situation would say maybe something did happen. According to Beis Shammai, we can't assume it. We don't have enough to assume it. Because since, according to Beis Shammai, if he divorced her because of some kind of adultery or something similar to that, so that he's done with her, he's disgusted with her, doesn't want to have anything to do with her. And therefore, even if they were in seclusion, you can't assume anything happened, and therefore there are no witnesses to the Kedushin. Beis Hillel, though, they say that no, that she needs another get, which means that the mere fact that the witnesses only saw the yichud, they only saw the seclusion, but no act, nonetheless, that's enough to say that there was an act, and there were witnesses to the act, and that there's an act, we assume that they did it for the purpose of Kedushin. Now, why is Beis Hillel not like Beis Shammai? Why is Beis Hillel so quick to say? Why do they assume something happened? Meaning enough, they're assuming something happened enough to actually say the witnesses who saw them going into seclusion will be the witnesses for Kedushin. Beis Hillel allow a man to divorce his wife for any reason. Therefore, there is no reason for him not to want to have relations with her. Yeah, he divorced her for whatever reason. And maybe because he's a hothead, whatever it is, he divorced her. And he can have any reason to do so, right? Whether it's correct or not. At the end of the day, he has a right to do it. That is the power of giving a divorce, of a man giving a divorce. There's no restriction like Beis Shammai that is only because of Erev Hastaver, because of some kind of issue of adultery. He's allowed to divorce her, whether it's proper or not, but he's allowed to divorce her for any reason. But for any reason doesn't mean that he still wouldn't be attracted to her. Since they were alone together, we assume that they did indeed have relations with each other, and therefore what comes out at the end is, as they bring down here from the Gemara, Hein edi yichud, hein edi bia. The witnesses to going to seclusion are considered witnesses over an act amount of relations, and therefore, if we have that act, we assume that act was done for Kedushin. We have witnesses to it. It's considered we have enough. The witnesses, if the witnesses see the seclusion and know there is, and therefore know that there is an act of relations, and we know that if they would do it for the purposes of remarriage, because they wouldn't want to make their act a sinful act. That's enough that we have witnesses to another Kedushin, and therefore she's getting another get from this guy. Okay? Now, so that's the Machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai say she doesn't need another get. Beis Hillel say she do. Umaidim, but the Mishnah continues. Amasai, I skipped a line, skipped a few words. Amasai, when do Beis Hillel say, when do they say this opinion about needing a second get? Bisman and Iskarshim and Nesuin. Only when the original Kedushin took place after Nesuin, after a full marriage. And then we say, well, they were once fully married, they've had marriage relations before, they're comfortable with each other, so we assume that it happened again. But if, let's say, the story is that she was divorced from Erisin, now at the stage of Erisin, meaning before a chuppah, you're not allowed to have marital relations. And therefore the assumption is they never were intimate with each other. In that situation, when the divorce happened from Erisin, and then they were in seclusion, even Beis Hillel agree, she doesn't need a second get from him. That's because he is not yet comfortable with her. To be able to, he's not comfortable with her. He'd be embarrassed to now have relations with her. And therefore, even though they're in seclusion, we don't have enough to make an assumption that they had marital relations. And therefore, even though they saw the seclusion, even Beis Hillel would say that we can't assume there was marital relations. That means we don't have witnesses to a second Kedushin, and therefore she doesn't need another get from her husband. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.